So we were gonna go over the 8th and 9th circles of hell. So we're back in hell. If you go to page 28 and 29 in your book, it's got the plan of the Inferno. And so I think we said that we were going to read Cantos 23 through 31. And so that would be, it's called the Malabolge. It's kind of a strange word. Male is bad in Italian, and bolge, it's kind of like, I think a better translation is like ditch or something, but I've heard people call it like, I don't know what the other people call it, but it's more like a ditch. But the way it's set up, there's like 10 ditches in the Malabolge, and they're all different classes of people that have perverted kind of like the intellect. So that's the main part of the human person. So the body gives us, remember, all the 5 senses, and then the soul that each person has gives us our intellect and the will, and then and St. Jerome would say the conscience. So remember last time we talked about when you make a covenant with somebody, when God will form 3 covenants with the human person. One of the covenants that God forms with the human person is he forms a covenant with single people. And another covenant that God will form is with married people. And the third covenant is with religious. And so when what God is asking when you form a covenant with him is you to dedicate, we could say consecrate if you wanted, your will to the person that you're making the covenant with. I think we talked about a little of this last time. So single people, when they receive the sacrament of confirmation, they're making a covenant with God. But they're making, every covenant was God. That's the definition of a covenant. So a contract is something, an agreement between 2 people, 2 businessmen or something. But a covenant is when you make a contract with God. So one of the persons in a covenant is divine. It's God himself. And so when the single person makes a covenant with God, we call that the sacrament of confirmation. And God gives to the single person 7 gifts of the Holy Spirit to help that person dedicate their will to God. Now sometimes God will talk directly to us and he'll tell us what he wants us to do. Other times God doesn't tell you what to do. He makes you figure it out for yourself. How do you figure out for yourself what God wants you to do? That's where you have to go to your conscience. So that's why I put this in there. The single person, he makes a covenant with God and he turns his will over to his conscience. So you always hear, you have to do what your conscience tells you to do. That's the person, the persona that you've made the covenant with, besides God, is with your conscience. Where is your conscience? It's at the deepest part of your soul. It's where St. Augustine said it's where God resides. St. Augustine was looking for God outside of himself, and he couldn't find God. And then he found out, when he looked inside of his soul, that when he went to the deepest part of his soul, that's where he found God. And so God is residing in your conscience, and that's why he's given you those 7 gifts of the Holy Spirit in confirmation, so that you can use those 7 gifts to discern God's will, what it is your conscience is telling you to do, and dedicate your will to whatever your conscience tells you to do then. A married person, they all start out, so it's like a trunk on a tree. Everybody starts out single. Nobody starts out married. Nobody starts out religious. Everybody has to start out single. So you go through the sacrament of confirmation, and then if God calls you to another covenant called the matrimonial covenant or marriage, then a single person moves from that way of life to the married life, and now instead of their will being responsive to their conscience, you give your will to your spouse. So that's why we said last time, if you're the husband, if his wife tells him to take out the garbage, then he has to do it. Because why? Because she's the one that tells me what to do. God has given her the care of my soul. If I'm the married person, the only way I'm going to get to heaven is if I listen to my wife. How does the single person get to heaven? By listening to his conscience. How does the married man get to heaven? By listening to his wife. How does the married wife get to heaven? By listening to her husband. So if the husband comes home and says, you have to fix me a 4-course meal, then she has to do it because her husband told her to do it. She doesn't question, just like the single person can't question what his conscience told him to do. You can't question what your married spouse tells you to do because they have your best interests, your salvation or your sainthood in mind. And then it's on a continuous track. Then people can be called to religious life. And so it's not like a straight line, but it kind of lets me be something like this. And so here, when you become religious, you turn your will over to God. And so you just do what God tells you to do. In the form of a priest, it'd be like being obedient to your bishop. In the form of like the religious sisters, like the Daughters of Divine Love, listening to their Mother Superior. You have to do what they tell you to do because they're responsible for your salvation. Okay? And so in the Malabolge, there's these evil ditches or these bad ditches. There's 10 of them, and they're all littered with people that their will was corrupted. They didn't do what the Holy Spirit told them to do. They didn't do what their spouse told them to do. They didn't do what God told them to do or their bishop told them to do. And so Dante is really big about most of the people that are in hell. Yeah, there's a fair number of lay people, we would say, but most of it's like scandalous religious people. So it's mostly these that Dante goes after are the people that he winds up running into at the different levels of the Malabolge. But Aristotle said that man was a political creature. And by that he meant not so much politics like we think Republican and Democrats or something, but that man was a creature that had to live with other men. Animals, as a sense, there are some animals that are pack animals, but most animals live by themselves. They have individual family where, parents have offspring, create offspring and things, but for the most part, as soon as the baby raccoon grows up, he's on his own. He doesn't stick around with mama raccoon and papa raccoon. He's just by himself and he forms his own family and he goes off by himself. But not man. Man could live that way because man is an animal. We could live by ourselves and we could make a decent go of it. But because Aristotle called it a political creature, I think we would use the word social. Our lives are better because of the social interactions we have with others. We learn things from each other. And that learning that we pick up, it becomes exponential. We're seeing that nowadays with so many parts of the world are, we can correspond with people from half a world away, like with a phone call conversation that's bounced off a satellite beam, and we can talk to them like we're talking to the person in the same room. And so mankind's progress has really picked up, even in the last 1 or 2 generations, that we're this social creature, and that we're sharing the intellectual knowledge that we have of ourselves with other people. And now our intellect is growing. So before, you had to read a book and find out what somebody else knew and wrote in their book. And Dante makes the point that a person, if they know something, even if they come to know knowledge of something for the first time, that the first person that invents something, like we could say Albert Einstein and his E equals EMC squares, this is that equation that Einstein's known for. Like the energy is equal to the mass times the speed of light squared. Like if you convert, this crayon here has a mass to it. If we could turn the mass of this pen or this crayon into energy, it'd be so much energy, it'd be the mass times the speed of light, which is a big number, but that's squared. That's how much energy we could get out of just burning up this marker. And we see that with nuclear power plants all the time, but there's so much energy caught up in matter, and we see that with the burning of coal and everything. Well, Dante makes the point that if somebody comes up with something new, it's in the nature of the man to share it with his fellow man. That's what Aristotle was saying too. You're a political creature, you're a social creature, and we saw this in heaven about a month ago. Remember when we visited St. Thomas Aquinas, and we talked to St. Dominic, and we talked to St. Francis and St. Bonaventure. When Dante had a question, even before he voiced the question, he just had a thought of what my question is. St. Thomas Aquinas could read his mind and had the answer to the question. And so St. Thomas says, ask me that question, I know the answer to that. St. Thomas Aquinas, as a saint in heaven, had to answer the question, or he would default his sainthood. Remember we talked about when I was in grade school, and I can remember in the 6th grade, because we had to go from McWayne School to Storm School. So I went through kindergarten all the way through 5th grade in McWayne School in Batavia. And then I was finally going to be a 6th grader, and that was the highest grade level. Then junior high was 7th and 8th, and then you went to high school with the last 4 years. But so our grade school was 6th grade, and so I was finally going to be like, what 6th graders, they were king of the playgrounds is what we called us. But finally, and I got through my 5th grade. I was like looking forward to my 6th grade year when I was going to be king of the playground with my classmates. And then they built this new school on the other side of town that was just 4 blocks down the road from my house, and I had to go to that school. And then when you go to this brand new school, suddenly it's not the same. Like everybody's on equal footing because, everything's brand new to everybody. And so we're at the 6th grade and at this new school, and I can remember we're changing classes because they're getting us ready to go to the junior high where you switch classes every hour. Or whatever, so they're trying to get us ready for junior high classes. And I remember we switched from math and science, and they still do that at the Catholic schools that was at. They always switch for those, and then you have your regular teacher for most of the other classes. But I can remember switching, I think it was for, somehow we switched I was in a different one for spelling or something, or something, so I was this rotten speller, as you know, and there was these girls that, they could spell Mississippi like the drop of a hat, so, and chrysanthemum and secretary, all those difficult words that you couldn't spell when you were a kid. So, I remember the teacher was saying, what's the answer to this? And I was like, those stupid girls, why don't they raise their hand and tell the teacher? They know the answer. And then, okay, no one's going to say, then we're going to have to we'll just pick some unlucky soul that's going to have to answer this. And sure enough, they picked me. Oh, Randy, what's the answer to this? I don't know. It's like, why don't you smart people answer these questions? It's like, it's a part of the human person that you have to give the knowledge that you have to another that doesn't have it. We see this with Cain and Abel. Remember, they both gave a sacrifice to God. Abel's was acceptable, but Cain's wasn't. And then Abel, it's really cryptic, but Abel says he went into the field with his brother, and that's where Cain kills him. Why was Abel going into the field with his brother? Well, Cain was a farmer, and he was going into the farmer. Abel was going to show him which plants to pick out to give a cereal offering to God that would be acceptable. He was a shepherd, Abel was, and so he took the firstling from his flock and gave that to God as a sacrifice, and God looked at it because it was the best that Abel had to offer. He accepted it. But Cain was like, he just took some corn that had blight on it or something, or rust, and he's like, I just give this to God because I can't eat it. And God's not going to eat it anyway. He's not going to care. And he looks at it, and God's like, what's this blight on this corn you gave me? I'm not accepting this. This isn't the best of your work. So Abel was going with his brother, knowing what was a pleasing sacrifice to God himself, to pick out a fruit offering or cereal offering that would be good to God. And then Cain kills Abel. See, it's in the man's nature to help out what somebody else doesn't know, especially your brother. And that's what these people in the Malebolgia are guilty of. It's not so much that they looked out for themselves, they did, but it's like they deceived their brothers. And so all of these, when you go to page 28 and 29, or it's mostly on page 29, you see the eighth circle there. It says, just above the eighth circle, and it's Canto 18, it says the Malebolgia, so that's how you see it, the bad ditches or whatever. What was, some people call them something else. I can't remember what they call them. But it's these people that they twisted language in a sense. Dante says, he's a poet, so he says, language gives clothing to our thoughts. Isn't that an interesting way of putting it? How do I express what's in my mind? I use words. And Dante, especially writing poetry that rhymes, remember that A-B-A verse, C-D-C verse? He's trying to put into poetic verse what he's seen in the Inferno, what he's seen in purgatory, what he's seen in heaven, and to relate that to us who didn't make this journey. None of us have died and have gone through hell or into purgatory or ascended to the highest of heaven, but because Dante has, by this gift given to him by God and instigated by Mary, St. Lucy, and what's his girlfriend's name? Beatrice. So, instigated by them, Dante has to give us this information. But these people in the Malebolgia, they don't. They deceived their fellow man. So here are, in the first chasm is, that's another word for it. A bolgia is like a chasm. So it's like a rut. I think some people call it a rut or a chasm. The first chasm are those are seducers. The second chasm are the flatterers. These are people that are using words to deceive people. So here the flatterers, they made somebody feel good about themselves when they shouldn't have. The person said, oh, you're doing fine, and the person was doing terrible. They deceived the person into continuing to do the bad work that they were doing, and then they lost their jobs or whatever. The Simonizers, like people that used religious things for money. And so he puts a couple of popes there, and even Pope Nicholas III is there, but he's got in parentheses, you see where I'm at? He's got Boniface VIII and Clement V. These are popes that are going to come after St. Nicholas. or Pope Nicholas. He's got Nicholas already in hell. He thought that, Nicholas is trying to rebuild some of the churches in Rome, and so he's using the sale of indulgences to fund things, even before St. Peter's is going to be repaired. And he's got Boniface and Clement V. He's got them they're gonna wind up in hell. The fourth chasm are the futurists, people that are like what we call astrologers or something. So all these people, the swindlers are in the fifth chasm, the hypocrites are in the sixth, thieves are in the seventh, the eighth are corrupt advisors, the ninth are instigators of scandal and schism. And so these are people that they used language to deceive their fellow man. Language clothes our thoughts, Dante says. These people, they had bad thoughts, but they deceived people. They coated over their thoughts with beautiful language so that people would believe them. And so one of the interesting things in the ninth chasm, you see there it says instigators of scandal and schism. So people that split the church. He's got Muhammad here. So the Muhammad, it was said that he was a Catholic. He was a Catholic priest. He wanted to be a bishop, but the church wouldn't ordain him a bishop. And so then he goes off and he forms a totally separate religion. So what does Dante have him? Those instigators in the ninth chasm, they're split open like a barrel, he says. It's what it is, these ditches, they're circles. I think at one point he says one circle is 8 miles around and it's half a mile wide. And it's only, I think he only gives that one definition of how big these ditches are when there's this one man that's suffering from, he's accumulating fluid and he's so big and he's so swelled up and everything, he can't move. And, but he tells Dante that he hears that there's some other schismist that's there. It's this Bertram de Born. See that name? It's an actual person. His punishment is he's all swelled up with this fluid, and he's got to kind of like roll around the ditches. He can barely walk, and he has to keep drinking. He's thirsty, and so he's drinking water, but he's just filling up with more water. And then he's hoping to get all the way around this 8-mile trek, because once you get to one point at the circle, there's a demon with a knife, and he cuts you open, and then he'll lose all this water. But what happened is pretty gross. The demon will cut you, depending on who you are and what your sin was, how much of a schismatic you were. He splits you from your mouth down to your intestines. And so these people, as they're walking, the slit is getting bigger and bigger, and their insides are starting to fall out through the hole. And so by the time you get to the end of the road, your intestines are all out. There's supposed to be 32 feet of intestines. You're tripping over your intestines as you come around. And then you finally, your body heals itself. And by the time your body finally heals that wound, here comes the demon. You've come around. He slices you open again. So it's really bad punishments. But this is what happened to Muhammad, because he led so many people astray with a new religion. He's cut open from his mouth to his belly, and where was I going with this? It's just that remember we always say in John's Gospel, they say Jesus is the Word. What are words? They're the language that clothes our thoughts, and Jesus is the Word of God Himself. What does Jesus say? I only tell you what the Father has told me. But all these people in the Malebolge, they deceive people. They don't say the truth. They say what's false. So when Muhammad runs into Dante and Virgil, he says, "What are you doing here? Are you just looking down into this ditch because you're worse than me? I'm in the 9th chasm. You're going to be in the 10th." He says, "You go on. Don't be looking at me and my guts pouring out in front of you. You go on to your punishment." And Virgil says, "Nope, he's not here because he's being punished. He's just here to witness all of your punishments." And Muhammad looks at him, and they're not sure because all these people in the Malabolgi are liars. And so they don't know, is Virgil lying to us because he's a liar just like we are? Like a liar is the last person to trust someone, right? And that's really the fault of the sin. See, we think that, liars are bad people because they deceive innocent people into thinking that what they say is the truth when they bent the truth and they tell us in such a convincing way we think it's the truth. We think that they're bad because they've hurt us by their distorting our intellect of what they told us. But really, the liar is deceiving himself and hurting himself. But we don't look at it that way. But these liars, they no longer know what the truth is. And so when somebody else tells them something, they automatically think, that's a lie. It can't be the truth because I wouldn't tell you the truth. Why would you tell me the truth, right? And so when the truth is presented to them, they don't believe it. And what is the truth? That Jesus Christ is the Son of God. That God's Son, the second person of the Trinity, took on a human body like ours. And so the deeper you go in the Malabolgi, or the level of the chasms, the more evil and wicked are their thoughts and the lies that they speak. And such that nobody's saying the truth anymore. One of the demons actually tricks Virgil. And Virgil, I don't know why he did it, but there's these, it's kind of hard to picture, but so there's, let's go to that funnel picture. So, where's the picture of hell?
46.
Yeah, 46, yeah, 46, 47. So you can see where's the chasms, the great abyss, and then it's the chasms. Yeah, the chasms of frost. So that's the 8th circle. So, and you can see all of the different ones. So there's the seducers, the flatterers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to 10, the falsifiers. So the schismatics, that's where Muhammad is. There's, as you can see, there's little ridges. So they're circles, but they're going down the funnel. And so that 8th circle down, I think that's the one that's 8 miles in length, 8 miles to go around the circle. And it's a half mile wide. So this is a half mile, and this is 8 miles in circumference for the whole circle. That one guy, I never got to it, that guy that was all bloated up with the water, he hears that there's another guy, one of the people that he hated in life, he hears that their soul has just died and they're in his circle. And so they tell him that he keeps going to the side of the circle to get more water to drink because he's thirsty. But that, and the more he drinks, the slower he moves. But that this other guy is ahead of him in the ring that he hates. And so he's willing to not go to the side to satisfy his thirst, to catch up with this other guy that's bad, just to laugh at him that he's in this bad spot too. And the guy's like, Dante's like, you're in the same hole, and you're gonna laugh at somebody that's, but they're all against each other, even though they have the same sin. They hate each other like they were enemies, and that's that's how Satan deceives us. There's like, come join us. You'll have more fun doing these wicked and perverse things that God won't let you do. And there's a lot of other people down here, and they've done it, and they're happy doing these things. And so you wind up tricking. It's like, that old thing, the devil made me do it, and there's more people in hell than in heaven. Remember that one joke I got with the number of people in heaven? So there's Harry that remember the Knights of Columbus? He was married for like 50 years, raised all these kids, kept them going to church and everything, was a model Catholic. He finally dies, and he gets up to heaven. You remember this? He gets up to heaven, and God himself meets him at the gates of heaven. He says, "Harry, come on in. I've been waiting for you. So glad you're here. Let me show you around." And he shows him around heaven, gives him a big tour, and they're looking at everything. And then he says, "Harry, are you hungry?" And he says, "Yeah, I could eat." And he goes, "Come on in the kitchen. Let me fix you something to eat." So he sits him down at the table, and he goes over to the cupboard, and God takes out a can of tuna fish. And he goes over to the can opener. It's an electric can opener. And he opens up the tuna fish, and he puts a plate in front of Harry, and he splats the tuna fish right on there. Right on there. And so Harry's eating the tuna fish, and there's a hole in the cloud, and he can see all the way into hell. And so he's eating the tuna fish, he's looking into hell, and he can see they're setting up these long tables, these big banquet tables, and they're going to eat too. And so he's watching, and all of a sudden, I don't know what they're going to eat in hell. I'm having tuna fish. I can't imagine what they're going to have, worms or something in hell. And he looks down there, they're having T-bone steaks. So they're having he looks at the tuna fish, and he's like, "Why, they're having T-bones in hell? I'm eating tuna fish?" And God comes in the kitchen, he says, "Harry, do you like the tuna fish?" "Well, yeah, it's the best tuna fish you ever had." "Great, I'm glad you like it." So the next day, he's kicking around at the clouds, and God comes up to him and says, "Harry, I'm so glad you're here. Are you hungry?" "I could eat." "Come on in the kitchen, let me fix you something." Sits him down at the table, goes over to the same cabinet, opens it up, another can of tuna fish, over the can over, right on the plate. He's looking down through that hole as he's eating. They're setting up the table. Wonder what they're going to have today. Today they're having lobster. Holy cow, they're having lobster. They're having tuna fish. And the third day, same thing. Goes in the kitchen, over to the same cabinet, puts another can of tuna fish in front of him. And Harry's like, "I'm not going to look today. I'm just going to be upset anyway, so I'm not going to look through that hole in the cloud." And God comes in, and he looks down there, he's looking out the corner of his eye, they're having Kung Pao chicken. And God comes in, he says, "Harry, you like the tuna fish?" "Yeah, it's great. It's the best tuna fish I ever had. But, I got a question for you, God."
Right.
"Go ahead, ask me. I know all the answers." "Okay, well, there's a hole right in this cloud, and I can see all the way into hell, and I've been watching them setting up tables and seeing what they eaten. The first day, they had T-bone steaks. The second day, they had lobster. Today, they're having Kung Pao chicken. How come all we ever have in heaven is tuna fish?" And God says, "It just don't seem worthwhile to cook for 2 people. He's the only one that made it into heaven. All these other people wind up in hell. That's the devil convinces us. Everybody's doing this. You might as well do it too, right? And so all these people are in the same misery, and they hate each other in the Malabolgi. But it's that this language is what clothes our thoughts, and Jesus is the Word, and Jesus only tells us what his Father told us to tell him. Told him to tell us. And so there's a big thing about your intellect and the words that you use to express it, and that if you know the truth, it's up to you to tell the truth to the person that doesn't know what the truth is. He's been misled, or he's just naive, or he's just young and doesn't know what the truth is. It's up to you. And that's why the church always says that it's up to parents to teach their children the faith and to make sure they're supposed to be the catechists, but they can give that job over. But ultimately, the catechesis of our children is up to us, that we can ask the church to help us, but ultimately God is going to hold us responsible for, he gave us a knowledge, and did we pass that knowledge on to the people that we brought into the world and that we love? So the British had come up with the term, even back in Dante's, they're the ones that came up with the word neighborhood. And it wasn't, when the British people came up with the word neighborhood, it wasn't to classify a geographic area, but it was to talk about the virtue, how to live the virtuous life with the person that lived next to you. That's how the origination of the word neighborhood came into being. It's how do I live the virtuous life in the presence of the persons that are closest to me. And see, that's how we get our word for neighbor then. And Jesus, Jesus talks about your neighbor, but that word neighborhood, that didn't come into existence until about the 11th or 12th century. And the British are the caveats for that language of neighborhood. It was how to live a virtuous life in the presence of other human beings. And that goes all the way back to what Aristotle says, that the man is a political creature, or we would say is a creature that's community-minded. And we use a language to talk to each other. So you see, I'm getting ahead of myself, but back on that page 40, where was the outline of hell? Yeah, on 29. In the 10th chasm, there's these giants. Nimrod, that is remember it says in the Bible, remember the Hebrews, they go and scout the Holy Land? Moses has them go and scout the Holy Land. And I think, who's the good scout? I don't know. Moses sent 9 princes to scout the land. And they came back, and they brought, carrying between them on a pole, a cluster of grapes. The grapes were so big, it took 2 men with a stick behind them. They had just a bunch of grapes like you see at the store. But the grapes were so big, it was 2 men carrying them on a pole, and they were dragging them all on the ground. And this is some of the fruit we brought back, and the people there, they're veritable giants, it says. Dante puts these giants at the lowest level, in the lowest level of the Malebolge, the 10th chasm. He puts the Nimrod is one of the giants. He's the one that instigated the building of the Tower of Babel. Remember, there was only one language, and the man got ahead of himself, and he said, let's build a tower, and we'll build this tower, and we'll reach all the way up to where God is. We can't wait for God to bring us to heaven. We'll get there on our own. We'll build this giant tower. We'll ascend ourselves. And then God throws confusion into the man in all these other languages then. So Nimrod is this giant who actually lowers Dante and Virgil out of the Malebolge and out of the 10th pit, or the 10th chasm, into the lowest level of hell, where that 9th circle where Satan is then. But it's a giant that does it. And they try to talk to Nimrod. He can understand them because they're speaking a language. But Nimrod, all he can speak is gibberish. It's just like they can't understand him because he's still confused. His intellect has been so corrupted, he can't clothe his thoughts anymore in language. To get Dante and Virgil to find out what he's saying, he can't converse with them, but he can hear them because they're still speaking, quote unquote, the truth or whatever. That they're on this mission, like the Blues Brothers, they're on a mission from God, But one of the interesting things is that to get from one of these chasms, and remember on that picture you see all those little bumps. That's on page 46, right? Yeah. You see all those little bumps, and you see those giants. It's got those. One of those is Nimrod. So these are the giant people that the Israelites ran into that were in the Holy Land at one point. But to get from one of those ridges to the next, there's a bridge. And to go from, I think it's like I think it's like from the 8th to the 9th or the 9th to the 10th. They're looking, this one demon tells them, oh, Virgil asks the question, how do I get from this level, the Malebolgia, to the next? Because I got to take Dante over. We're supposed to go through all these regions. And the devil tells them, oh, just go straight ahead. You'll see the bridge. And they get there, and they're looking, and they got the exact directions. There's no bridge. And the one poor soul that's in there, he's just laughing. And he says, I heard tell sometime when I was in college, because the university system had just kicked in when Dante's writing this, I heard somewhere from my college professor that the devil was a liar from the beginning. And so why do you expect one of the demons that's in hell to tell you the truth? And he goes off kind of smirking and trying to get even with Dante and Virgil. But so they have to crawl down to the next, they have to get themselves dirty and they crawl through. That's some of the dirt that, remember, they have to wash off themselves when they finally get to purgatory. But Virgil is really upset that this demon lied to him. But it's, when you think about it, they can only lie. Their intellect has been so perverted that they can't say anything but a lie now. And Dante, when he runs into those people that are split open, he's amazed by them, and he wants to talk with them. And Virgil gets mad with him and says, if you're going to talk to these people, I'm going to leave you here. Because, there's something about, like, I think you see it when there's a car accident or something. Like, there's a car accident on the highway, you've been backed up for like 3 miles, and it's taken you, 40 minutes to go that 3 miles. And if people would just stop looking, the traffic would go faster. As soon as you pass the accident, everybody's like a bat out of hell, going, twice as fast as what the speed limit is to make up for time lost. But, if people would have just stopped looking when they came up to the accident, the backup would have been flowing at least at a faster speed. It wouldn't take this long. But everybody's got to, when they get up to there, they got to look over it. Well, I waited. I'm going to have to look at this, this bad accident or whatever. I'm going to take a look. And that's how it is with Dante. He's like marveling at these sinners that, holy cow, you did that. I'll never forget. This is a side thing. I remember when it was my first assignment, and I was at St. Patrick's in St. Charles as an associate. I think it was my second year after ordination. Might have been my third, I don't know. And no, it was the second. And I went up to give Father Cesar asked me to do a retreat he was the associate at St. Thomas in Crystal Lake. And so he wanted me to give a retreat to his RCIA people before Easter Vigil. So people that were coming into the faith, and they were going to have a little retreat and have their first confessions and everything. And so I went up there to give the retreat, and then it came time for the confessions, and Father Cesar was given an examination of conscience, how to what to do with the mechanics of the confession, and then how to confess your sins and what your sin should be. And he says, at the end, he says, and don't worry, there's only 10 sins that you can commit, and Father's heard them all. He's absolved you of those sins before. Don't worry about, being embarrassed or something. You'll be in the confessional. He'll be behind the screen. He doesn't know you. You don't know him, really. It'll be fine. Just say your sin and be absolved of it. Don't worry about it. Father's not going to think anything more of you, and even if he did, he don't know you from Adam. They didn't have name badges and everything during the retreat. So I'm in the confessional, and I'm listening to these people's sins, and holy cow, there was some. I was like, yeah, I heard them all, but it was this like the combination. Like these people did that, this, and the other. And I was like, holy cow, how did you find time to do all that? I was like scandalized, but it was like, holy cow, I wonder what the next one's going to be like. And they kept getting worse, because, the women come in first because they're the brave ones, and the guys are last. So the worst ones were at the end, holy cow. So I was like, holy, I like crawled out of the confession. I was like beat down. I was like, all these sins, holy cow. It was just too much too early. Father Caesar had me hear all the confessions because he had taken these people through RCA and he didn't want them, he didn't want them to be inhibited saying their sins or whatever. So, but that's like Dante, like he's looking at all these sinners and he's like marveling at the bad things that they did. And Virgil has to get mad at him and say, I'm just going to leave you here if you're going to talk to all these people. I don't want you getting ideas of when you go back to life, things that you could do that aren't on your radar right now. So, but there's this interesting thing about these bridges, that some of the bridges are there, but they're barely passable. And it turns out that when Jesus died on Good Friday, remember how it says in the scripture that there was an earthquake and that the dead the dead came out of their tombs. And that's, of course, when Jesus' soul leaves his body, that's death, right? The definition of death is when your soul and your body separate. And so when the divine soul of our human Lord, he had a human body, when they separate, there's this great earthquake. That's the divide, and the temple curtain is torn in two. And Jesus, where does his soul go? Well, his body goes in the tomb, and his soul, he goes down into, we say hell in the Apostles' Creed, but it's in a sense, it's purgatory. But it's not purgatory because purgatory isn't invented until the Christ dies on the cross. So this limbo, or this, it's like where Virgil is, the devil came to the people that were in, we'll say his hell, because that's what the catechism says. Every day he would come and say, you're never going to get in, the gates of heaven are going to be closed forever. That angel with the fiery swords guarding him, you're not going to get in there. You might as well come to hell. At least there's a definitive place. You're in no man's land here in this hell that you're at now, and you're just a soul. You want your body back, come to hell. And of course, none of the souls are taking them up on it. Maybe there were some that were bad, but so none of them do that. So Jesus goes down to hell on Good Friday, and that's what he's saying. He says to all the souls, now I'm going to send to my Father, and I'm going to unlock the gates of heaven. That cherubim with the fiery sword is going to sheathe it. You'll be able to get back in there after you've made reparations for your sins. Come with me, everybody, to purgatory. And that's when purgatory is invented then, is when on Good Friday. They cease to be in hell. Christ went to hell for 3 days. That's that extremely large city. Remember, Jonah predicts that. Remember Jonah in the whale? He's in the body of the whale for 3 days. And once he gets spit out of the whale, he lands on the shore of Nineveh. And Nineveh is such a great city. It took how many days to walk through? 3 days. And so Nineveh is where Jesus walked for 3 days. It's 40 hours, but we say 3 days, telling all the souls in this enormously large city called hell at that one point, now you can come to purgatory. Come with me if you want to eventually get into heaven. And all the souls did, but there were some in the Malebolge, they couldn't. They had perverted the truth. When Jesus came to them, they didn't believe that this was God's Son. And so the truth looked them in the face. Remember Pontius Pilate? What is truth? These people in the Malebolge, they don't know what the truth is anymore. They've lied all their lives. They've deceived all their lives long. They don't know what the truth is anymore. And so when the Christ came to them on Good Friday, they didn't believe that he was God's Son. They didn't believe they could get out of this no man's land. They stayed there. And the Christ was so mad that these were creatures made in his image and likeness. The Father made us in Jesus' image, and they weren't believing that he was God. And that's the sole purpose of his life, was to convince people that he was. That's why he worked his miracles. That's why he walked on the water. That's why he did this, that, and the other thing and taught everything that he did, was to convince the 12 at least that he was God's son, and then sent them into the world to convince everyone else. He's so upset that he broke those bridges. And so it's called the harrowing of hell. The Christ, with that earthquake, he destroyed the bridges. So now those, they can't get from one ditch to the next. They'll always be trapped for all of eternity in the level of hell that they're at, because the bridges are destroyed. And Dante and Virgil see these bridges that are broken, and then there's the one that was supposed to go from the 8th to the 9th, the 9th to the 10th, I can't remember, that the guy says, oh yeah, just go right up ahead, you'll see it there, and it's not even there. That one was so destroyed because it's at the worst level of the chasm. It's the one that goes from the 9th to the 10th, that Jesus destroyed it totally. There's nothing left, but there's all this rubble and rock amongst